First and 12. A weekly roundup of America's most competitive football conference, the Big 12. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry.
Welcome back into First and 12 here on KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry with you. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Hopefully everyone has a happy and safe Thanksgiving holiday this week. It's the final week of the regular season. I think back to when you and I, Alex, had our week one episode of this show, and I think you said something to the effect of, we'll blink and it'll be Thanksgiving, and, well, here we are. We blinked, and we're already at the end of the road in the regular season for this memorable Big 12 season. And I got to say, one of the great games of this season took place last week in Salt Lake between Utah and Kansas State. Let's unpack what happened in our Big 12 game of the week.
The big time Big 12 game of the week on First and 12.
51-47. It was a historic game in Salt Lake because we've never seen a Utah defense in the history of Utah defenses ever give up 472 yards on the ground. If you would have had that on the bingo card, we would have said absolutely not. There's no way. In fact, everybody who was kind of lining this one up as what the wisdom of this game pick kind of was, hey, Utah's got to not just win this game, they've got to kind of show the committee that they can score a lot of points still. And they've been winning every Big 12 game, Mitch, by an average of 35-plus points. Now, they scored the 51. It took, of course, a miracle. It took a wild ending. It took the last 2:40 of the game when Utah was trailing by 12 points with 2:46 left in the game, and a very rare pick two with a flag that was on the play that ended up getting picked up that no one actually got much of an explanation on. I actually talked to one of the guys who works guy lives in my neighborhood, works for the replay booth at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and he goes, did you wonder why they picked that flag up? Because we didn't hear a word about it afterward. They just picked it up and said, hey, by the way, no penalty, 2 points for Utah on the pick two. Everyone was confused as to what was going on, and then the swing happens, and then it's a 10-point game suddenly instead of being a 14-point game potentially. But more importantly, Kansas State, I think, does what teams do who are 5-5 teams, Mitch, and they gave this thing away. I think this is what kind of Kansas State's season has been. Not necessarily to this effect. I mean, think about last week. They put up 14 points the week prior against the worst team in the league who hadn't won a conference game since 2023. Unfortunately, still have not. But they didn't. Like, they scored 14 points against Oklahoma State. Instead, they come in, and I've never seen a team be so effective against not just a Utah team, against any team I've ever watched a game with. I've never seen a team get run all over this much. It was 60-yard run after 70-yard run after 80-yard run, and just a phenomenal day of rushing, and Kansas State still couldn't pull it off. And Utah came from behind, used the ground game themselves. Devin Dampier and Bird Ficklin continue to be this 1-2 punch at quarterback, and I was super impressed with what they can do. I was equally as impressed with Kansas State. I felt really bad for Chris Kleiman after the game, who got obviously very emotional because they put it all out there and they came up short. And I think that's been kind of the story of their season so far.
It really has. And look, I know that on this show we've went in on the AP voters and the way that they rank teams, but Kansas State did remind us why they were viewed as a preseason top 25 team. They showed that talent. They've got talent. I mean, heck, they hung tough with Texas Tech a few weeks back, and until the fourth quarter where they had some turnovers, that's when that game broke open. So Kansas State still has players, but I think you hit it on the head where they give away games this year, and that's been their problem. And they've had a bad defense too, but that you're right about the scoring. I mean, Joe Jackson, that running back for Kansas State, he goes off for a 66-yard touchdown, an 80-yard touchdown. You hear that right there, and you say, a guy is going off for those type of touchdowns, you're going to win that football game, and they didn't. It's crazy to see. I think one of the big things that I come away from this game is, Bird Ficklin is just super dynamic, and you kind of wonder long-term what that's going to look like at the quarterback position. I know that Utah still wants to, hold out hope for potential playoff hopes. I know that kind of died tonight with them dropping a spot in the playoff rankings behind Miami, but I'm really curious to see what that quarterback outlook looks like. Dampier goes 18 of 33, 259, 2 touchdowns, no picks. But Ficklin is just so dynamic running the football, and he's just such a good playmaker that he's pretty exciting at what he could become in the future.
Let me just throw something out there. Oklahoma State just hired a new head coach out of North Texas, Eric Morris. Oklahoma native, Bert Ficklin, could potentially be sitting behind, Devin Dampier for this next season, of course, which I think, everybody knows that. Devin Dampier, I don't think he's going anywhere. He's going to stay another year.
Sure.
If you could potentially score 7 figures at your home state, I don't know if he grew up an Oklahoma State fan, an Oklahoma fan, a Texas Longhorn fan, who knows down there in Oklahoma, but and there's some loyalty there with the guy who offered you, because he said that about Kyle Whittingham. Like, man, Kyle, he offered me. As soon as he saw me play, he brought me to Salt Lake, and then he offered me the day that he met me, and that means a lot to me. It'll mean a lot until the 280,000 or whatever the number is that maybe he was, getting in terms of a number of being able to be here and get a little bit of NIL money. If that turns into something significant, an $850,000 or $1 million offer somewhere, then you're going to see a young man go somewhere else, especially when you look at it and you go, hey, in the end, I'm not the starting quarterback. But you're right. From a dynamic standpoint, and look, and here the other thing goes for, I don't care how many stories they can put out there about Devin Dampier and Bert Ficklin being best friends off the field. We've all got bank accounts that need to get filled up, my guy. So, you know how quickly that conversation goes away for 19-year-olds. And by the way, your best friend can still be your best friend at a different school, and so it doesn't really matter. To me, it's interesting to see how these things play out. These are conversations that we would have never had before, and yet we have to have them every time now. If a coach leaves, think about what Lane Kiffin's going to be doing. If he goes to LSU, the amount of guys that are going to be already thinking about what they look like in yellow and purple from that Ole Miss roster, you can guarantee that Trinidad Chambliss cat is going to be looking at maybe even moving over there, depending on what their loyalties look like. So college football's wild, and I'm telling you, that Utah-Kansas State game, what was weird was in the first half when that 80-yard run got busted off, it made it, I think, 38 to maybe 28 right before the half. They went down 10, I think, or maybe it was even 17. Yeah, they went down 17. So it was like 38 to 21, right?
31-21.
Or 31-21. He runs that 80-yard touchdown, and the crowd starts booing. Before he's even in the end zone, Mitch. Like, they're booing when he's at, like, the 20-yard line. They're not booing Kansas State. You know how Utah is. They have an expectation of that defense. They're booing their defense for not bowing up. And I've never seen a Utah defense get crushed like that. And Kyle Whittingham this week talked about it being one specific play that they just had a really hard time stopping, like to the tune of not stopping it at all. And going for 472 against a Utah team on the ground, I've never heard of it, man. And you and I have watched a lot of not just football in general, but that Kyle Whittingham and a Morgan Scalley defense have put on the field. I've never seen something like that.
Yeah, I haven't either. And I thought it was also noteworthy, too, with Utah's defense. One of their top guys, John Henry Daly, he goes down with an injury, and it's going to be a long-term injury. That was big for Utah. And Kyle Whittingham announced on Monday that Henry Daly, basically the new mayor of Sac Lake City, he's out at 11.5 sacks. That goes out the door when he goes down, and maybe that kind of, caused some on-the-fly changes because he's such a big piece of that defense. But that was surprising because Utah's always so stout. Did you read anything, too, into after the game when Kyle Whittingham got really emotional? I know he said that he just gets emotional about his guys, but I don't recall –
No.
You could see some real emotion there from Coach Whittingham.
Yeah, and this is his vibe. This is the way that Kyle Whittingham operates. And he even said earlier in the year, look, I'm going to be there, and then one day I'm going to be gone, and that's how I'm going to roll. But at the same time, like, you almost felt like, man, you wish you would have said something like, this was my last home game as the head coach of the University of Utah. And maybe that would have taken over the storyline, and he doesn't like that kind of stuff. But you know what? It would give a lot of, like, I don't know, a human face to Kyle Whittingham, which can sometimes come across as being made of stone, And so now he can go out however he wants, but that was a level of emotion we hadn't seen before. It felt different than just another senior night, which he's had 20 of before this. And so, we'll see how it goes down. I mean, in the end, you have to sort of balance out, not just looking in this at November, but how do you feel in January? How do you feel in February when you go, I could do this again. This feels weird that I'm not doing it. And I know he says he wants to hang out with his grandkids, but when the rubber meets the road, are you actually willing to walk away from it? I think he's probably already made that decision, and I think we got a little bit of a glimpse into that, but that's just us guessing, which is part of the fun of doing this. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got more to go on the program. When we return, I've got to say a couple things here in our Sound Roundup, including on the fly. I found something absolutely ridiculous in the College Football Playoff Rankings show on ESPN. So we're going to get into that. We're going to jump into what that sounds like and what the commissioner said to make this committee sound even more unbelievable tonight. We'll come right back. More to go. It is First and 12 right here on KSL News Radio.